We are going to start recording now. So for anybody who is joining us, we are here with Danny R. Peralta and myself, Sasha Bush, the director of the Nancy Willard and Eric Lindbloom archives, and we're talking about MTFCit, Danny's solo exhibition in our project space in the upstairs galleries. I just wanted to say, as we're getting going, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Danny, for being with us here. There's a lot of things that are happening in the world right now and in this country too. And we're still in a pandemic. And so things are still scary and weird. So I appreciate you being here and being here with us on a Sunday. It feels really good. Important to acknowledge that, as we're posting things on Instagram, there's a lot of things that are going on in the world. So we're not ignoring that, but it's good to be here with you. So a quick background, and before I go into everything, Danny and I are going to be having open hours next Sunday from 2 to 6 at the project space. So if you want to come and see Danny's exhibition, which closes on the 13th of March, if you want to come see Danny's exhibition, Sunday, March 6th, from 2 to 6, 133 College Avenue, Poughkeepsie, New York is our address. You can reach out to me, you can reach out to Danny, you can email me, you can also get in touch with me via Instagram. I'm just going to set up my screen here as I get going. A quick word about our archives. The Nancy Willard and Eric Lindbloom archives was founded in 2020 following Eric Lindbloom's passing, and it was founded by James Lindbloom, Eric and Nancy's son, and myself. Just a quick word of my connection. Eric and Nancy were good friends, and Eric was a mentor of mine, and I grew up down the street from him, so that's my connection to him. And the archives really serves in part to celebrate Eric and Nancy's individual artistic legacies and also their shared lives together. They lived in Poughkeepsie for more than 50 years and had an active, thriving community of artists that they would support, invite, come to the house. In 2020, we started the archives, and we decided, James and I, to turn Nancy and Eric's house into a project space. And so it has served since then as a project space where we have different exhibitions, we have programming. We've had a few different exhibitions there of 2 different photography collectives, one in August to October of 2021 with our co-curator, Christine Callahan, and I curated an exhibition there, and another curated by Ali DeLucia and myself of another photography collective. So we've had a few shows there, and we now have Daydreaming, which is a show in our downstairs space by Manny Afori, who's a Poughkeepsie-based artist. So we've had a few exhibitions there. And Danny's exhibition is the first of 3 in our In Conversation series. And this is a new project that we've started. Our next exhibiting artist, Anita Jones, is here with us as well. And the idea with this In Conversation series is really that we invite artists into the archive to make work with, alongside, in response to Nancy's work and Eric's work, so they get to know the archives, use our project space, our upstairs galleries, as a means to push their own work, as a means to learn about Eric's work and learn about Nancy's work, as a sort of creative space. The archives and our project space, alongside supporting Nancy and Eric's work, is really to build community, to build camaraderie between artists, between community members, and to really support artists and emerging artists and younger artists and older artists in sort of really intergenerational conversations. So we have artists who are older, we have artists who are younger, we have college students who are curating exhibitions. So Danny's MTFCit is really part of our programming. That's sort of making this community space. I'm just glancing here at my notes as I go. So I'm just going to read Danny's intro and then we will get started. So Danny R. Peralta is a Bronx, New York City-based multimedia artist who mainly works with a camera. He graduated from NYU's School of Education in 2000 and began working as an educator, photographer, and community developer. He has been awarded a Brio in 2007, then Focal Legacy Award in 2015, and the ICP Director's Fellowship in 2018. His work has been exhibited at the Museum of Moving Image, MoMI, CUNY Lehman College, and the Bronx Museum of the Arts. He is a graduate of the ICP BARD MFA program in 2020, and recently served as Executive Managing Director of the Point CDC in the South Bronx, where he integrates community revitalization campaigns with his creative practice. Cool. So, Danny, I just want to start clearly from your bio. You have do a lot of different work, but I just wanted to start before we talk about your exhibition by asking you today in your practice, what brings you joy and what are you most excited about in your practice?
Oh, that's you started with the hard question, bro. What brings you joy? Wow, that's a very interesting question. Because I think it's like it's fluid, right? As joy is, right? So the concept of joy, I'm not sure exactly what brings me joy, but I know what like brings me like satisfaction is like sitting down in a space with like an idea and then walking out with some semblance of it in whatever medium, you know, be it a photograph or be it you know, something you write or painting or whatever. So maybe that brings me joy, or just a level of excitement. I don't know. But I think being in conversation with folks, like I think about the times that I make work and where it comes from, and there's a lot of joy in like these conversations. I think that lead to work. I think that maybe I work off of joy and joyful moments as well as maybe grief, and kind of use those as like places to create from. So I don't know, there's levels of it, I guess, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, just being in a space and having a space, I think, to make things and yeah, is really important. I want to start with as we're going to be sort of cycling through, we're going to have some images here that are installation views. This is our upstairs gallery in our project space here. And so we're going to have some installation views and some actual pictures of Danny's work. I wanted to start with this installation, which is called Untitled, The Trees Speak for the Trees. Can you tell us, first of all, what are we looking at? What are the materials? I mean, you have in the title, we know sort of a little bit about what materials, but can you tell us kind of what we're looking at and how this came to be?
Sure. I think I want to take it back maybe a little bit and think a little bit about like, you know, the original intention when you and I spoke originally with the idea that it would, you know, there would be some sort of conversation with Nancy and Eric's work. And so I think I was immediately struck by the concept of like wood, you know, there's like these photographs that I think I was very interested in originally from Eric, some of these panoramic, these black and whites. And then initially that, and then right into reading, I forget the book now, I should have had it in front of me, but one of Nancy's books. And so really taking time to kind of think about those elements, right? And then thinking a little bit about the stuff that I was already thinking about, which is in some ways related to kind of wood and the cycle of wood and paper and like what happens to trees, you know, and the environment. And so yeah, so kind of riffing off of all of those ideas. And so so initially I knew that I couldn't just create like a photograph of trees, you know, even though I had been spending some time doing that actually during COVID and finding kind of corners of like solitude and just quiet and trying to be honestly with nature. You can't be around people, right? So I started developing relationships with trees and then starting to kind of think about, again, the life cycle of a tree. So I really was very interested in this experience to like bring them in. And the home is you know, has a lot of wood. The bookshelves are amazing, right? You have like these little 2-inch thick pieces of wood, and how do all these elements come together, right? To tell the story. So so I started to rub pieces of wood and bring them in, right? And graphite. And I started to think about you know, like actual life cycle, like how do you capture life cycles with you know, with wood, right? With these circular pieces, right? And how do those come together? What do you say with that? And actually rubbing, again, like, you know, dead tree trunks that are like, I don't know, you know, 3, 4, 5 feet wide, and kind of going in there and capturing, I guess, the markings of the tree and trying to bring it into the space. So it's like tree on tree on tree on tree. And ultimately, you know, what are the trees telling us, right? Like we're, you know, we're in a very discombobulated state, but also we are, you know, in a very unknown state, and it's not looking good, you know, and so in the same photograph of Eric, you kind of see a tree that may look like it's, you know, beautiful and young, and then you see something that's obviously been decayed. And I wanted to, again, bring that in. I wanted to accentuate the space that way, and again, think about all of these different things at once.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
so
no, that makes a lot of
different.
sense. And I was just going to ask, you know, you're touching on this a little bit, but there's all these different layers here that you made with this installation. And we have, like you said, there's the wood of the wooden blocks, there's the wood of your tree, of the actual wooden floor, there's the wood of the paper that's been turned into something else. There's all these different layers. Can you talk a little bit more? I mean, it feels like it's like what you're doing with this is visually putting layers, as you're saying, and also sort of like as a metaphor for life cycles of the house. You know, we talked about this a little bit, the life cycle of the house, life cycle of the trees around the space, life cycles of the trees in the Bronx. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, again, very similarly, like, you know, I don't know. I think there is, I don't know. I feel a certain urgency. You know, I talk a little bit about water in a lot of my work, and the urgency of like climate change, and what that means in our lifetime, and kind of pointing toward those things as we talk about other things. So I think for me, it's like, you know, that space again. I could have created I could have put bodies of work in there if it was like a white cube and just kind of set it up on a wall, and it could have moved that way. That's a home, and that home has its own life cycle. And I think that even if you see some of those elements there, they come from that home, they come from that community, they come from you know, the immediate surroundings. You know, you were telling me that some of that wood, you loaned me some of that, right? Like that's some of your pieces of wood, and so we brought that element into it. And that used to be a former bedroom of a child, right? And there's like toys in there, like these wooden toys. And again, there's all of these life cycles that are kind of zigzagging in that space, and so that's why I feel like it continues to grow. And this is one version of it. Maybe that's the more yeah, that's another version of it, right?
Yeah, this
And
is the most recent, the
yeah,
latest version of it. These two different views here with
yeah,
your carnation pieces.
cool. And then so there's a lot more of those coming for next week. And folks come out next week, they're going to be able to see even more parts to it, because again, I've been creating along the way to kind of, again, continue to add to the space and to add more life cycles to it, if you will. And so, you know, so that's going to continue to hopefully be something until the show goes down. But that's really where it is. And the original idea of the show also, it comes from a riff, right? And it comes from a song. It comes from KRS-One. There's The Bridge Is Over, and there's a part in it where he's talking about the 5 boroughs in New York City, and he's talking about, you know, Manhattan making it, and you know, queens taking it, and and people faking it and creating it, and really embodying that. Like, I don't know, I always get stuck in these little I don't know, like these little moments where I start to think that that's kind of who I am, right? I used to watch a lot of wrestling as a child, so like I have this thing where like this personality thing where I like fall into this character, and you start to mimic these things, and that rhythm of that song and those words of making it, faking it, creating it, taking it, like all of these things are part of this work, and I'm creating something, I'm taking something, right? I'm making something, right? I'm faking something, right? I don't make sculpture, right? I'm not that person that works in kind of these mediums per se, but I'm propelling myself in that way, and I think this piece is kind of that metaphor of that as well, and that's why I feel like the trees, again, they speak for themselves, and we need to kind of pay attention. But again, that's a riff of like, the Lorax, and speaking for the trees, but really, like we need to stop talking, right? Like you just need to let them speak and really kind of pay attention to what they're saying, right? And then follow that and be in rhythm with that. So that's what this is. This installation, I think, captures a lot of that. Those things together, maybe metaphorically, they kind of sit with wood and those mediums,
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think, in this installation about sort of growth and cycles and change and development. I wanted to ask you, I mean, I have a few pictures. For those of you who don't know, I think Danny maybe mentioned it, but Danny came up, I think maybe you came up 3 times, 4 times, something like that, to see the house, to start doing some installation, to start playing with your prints, to start arranging. And this installation started like this on the floor, and then it kind of gradually built up with more elements, and then you started adding different heights, and to the point of this right here. These 2 photographs are what the installation looks like right now. So I wanted to ask you, why did it need to change? Because as you were making it, and maybe, you're saying you're faking it because you're not a sculptor, but this is the way that this is a medium that you have to express the idea. So you are a sculptor, right? But why did this need to change, and what did you learn with each new change?
I felt like I needed to change because of what you said. Every time I kind of went up there, it was kind of a new discovery, right? About the community and again about this process. Like I think when we spoke about putting the show together again, it was, I don't know, late last year. It wasn't something that I necessarily like had a real full impression of what it was, and I think I don't know, but I think again when I think about the home and folks have been there. Hopefully, folks can see it. Like it's a really beautiful house. It's very, I don't know, you can feel a sense of like homeliness there, like you can feel at home, and at home, you kind of come and you drop things off, and you kind of you live in it and you embody it. And I think that's part of it too. Like I feel like if it was a gallery, maybe it's a little different, but in a home, yeah, you know what, let me bring more pieces to it. Let me keep adding to it. It's just like when you inhabit any kind of space, you start to leave remnants behind, and you start to accumulate parts of your life, really, again, that are just like parts of your memory, right? And all these little things kind of embody a different kind of memory potentially. And the show is really about the unknown. I've said this a lot. Like I've been spending a lot of time trying to dig into not knowing as much as possible as a way to kind of know, if that makes any sense. And that's why I experiment with all these mediums, because I'm really interested in like what I don't know about what I'm doing, or what I could be doing, besides what I may have already done potentially, right? So the trees again, and what's going to happen with the environment is an unknown, and then all these photographs of all these people that I don't know, and bringing them into the show and having a conversation across the room with unknown people and unknown forces and unknown mediums for myself is a big part of it. And yeah, and so that's kind of what you're seeing here, right? It's also these other kind of life cycles of photos too, and again, paper again in another way. And so yeah, so that continuous thought, but just kind of in different places potentially,
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think And I was going to ask you, and you touched on it, sort of a lot of people have commented on when they come into the house that it has a particular energy and it feels different. And I think, it's hard to um, it's hard to say exactly what that is, but Nancy and Eric lived in that house. This is a house, I think, um, maybe from the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, somewhere around there. But Nancy and Eric lived there for 50 years or so. And James, their son, lived there until he was 18 and then moved away and only came back and spent, a week, spent 2 months or so when he was clearing out the house after his father passed away, and hadn't lived there since he was 18 or so. So it's got a lot of history in it. And I wanted to ask, and you're talking about, that with this sense of urgency that we need to sort of listen more to the trees and step back, and what are this question, what are the trees saying? And I wonder, you touched on a little bit, if you could talk a little bit more, if the trees, what do the trees say, right? I wonder too, when you talked about it a little bit, what does the house say to you? And, does the house speak back as well? Because it seemed like, sort of, I'm just, been flipping through some of your pictures, your installation pictures. We're going to talk in a little bit about your archival pictures, but there are different elements of the house, that kind of spoke back or spoke to you in a different kind of way. This is how this room was at the start, before Danny started installing. This room was full of bookshelves, and one of the first things you had to do was sort of take away all the bookshelves, or most of them, to leave kind of a space like this, sort of an empty wall. So can you talk a bit more, like, how did the house speak to you, and how did it direct your process? Because you were making work throughout the show to add each time you came up.
Yeah. I think the concept of being able to again kind of use what the space kind of already had and repurpose it, I think that's important, right? I think I could have took all the shelves off and just left them, bare. But I think there's something about kind of keeping it in the room, and again just kind of rethinking about their use. I don't know if you see that shelf. I think it's more of a visual thing maybe for myself. Some of those shelves kind of couldn't move, so I wasn't able to get them out. I kind of like the way the shadows kind of come from above. There's kind of those kind of elements. But again, we're talking about woods. If you look at most of the photographs, especially in this series here, they're about like the life cycles of natural things, right? And so even the painting that's in the middle in the back is like a portrait, or like a triptych of a painting on wood, and the wood is exposed, and it's like again, so it's just about where the wood is, and yeah, there you go. It's all front and center. So that whole room to me is about trees, and about again the life cycle of trees. I think that I have a photograph in there of somebody holding seeds. So I even brought the seeds into the room, so you can kind of go from seed, and then there's a wall that says James's name on it, and so it's like all of these. I mean, the room does speak to you, and you look across, you say, well, you know what, that's that should go next to that, or that goes across from that, and there's some things that are already kind of built into the room that kind of ask you to use them, or to be in conversation with.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Can we, I'm really curious, because with these triptychs and quadtychs, have you done this before? Or was this, from what I understood when we were talking, this kind of, or I think we have maybe, you can see here, in this picture, there's these, triplets, quadtychs. Have you done this before, or is this a new element of how you're thinking about photographs?
I've actually done this, a long time, actually, now that I think about it. Some of the earlier work I did was more along these lines. I actually have a piece here at home that is a triptych, and that's like from almost 20 years ago. So I've been doing that. I think that I kind of went from the triptych in some ways to like the photo essay, the photo documentary, right? Where like it's a series, right? And it moves in a certain kind of way. And then I came a little bit back to maybe this kind of work or this level of it, this kind of element. So yeah, so I've kind of done it, but I've kind of been in and out of using it. I would say as a as a as a device, framing device, or as a way to kind of think or I don't know, show an image,
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it really it points to sort of the way that you're working in repetition. I mean, you're talking about it a lot, the way you're responding to the house, going back to the space, thinking very specifically, in response to Nancy, wrote a lot about the natural world and sort of circled and grew and built and deepened her understanding and sort of, but touched on a lot of the same themes throughout her work. And so did Eric as well. And so a lot of these sort of this repetition that you're doing in your photographs is interesting as a way of sort of not prioritizing a single image of your own work. I'm sort of thinking of this as I'm speaking, but I'm understanding it more as you're saying that with your own work. It's interesting that we have sort of these images that are these multiples that don't prioritize a single image, and then this sort of like device, this framing device you're talking about. And then with your found images that I want to touch on in a minute, some of them are like this, they're in this repetition, but some of them are like this, where it's really actually prioritizing a singular moment. And, an unknown moment, as you're talking about, but like a singular moment. And so there's, that's an interesting sort of like division there. I want to ask about your found photographs. Can you tell me, where did you find these? How are you thinking about these? How do these, you talked about sort of being more comfortable in not knowing. And in our conversations, you've talked about kind of finding these photographs and not knowing the backstory. So can you tell me a little bit about this? Is this also new, or have you been walking and finding these photographs for a while?
Yeah, so like I tried to not do that kind of stuff for a long time, but I've always kind of dabbled that way, right? Like you kind of find objects. I think that most recently, again, like I've actually taken, even the last like, I'm gonna say like 3 years, when I started to, I'm gonna say, shoot more with my little point and shoot camera. I started adapting kind of like that street style of photography. And so one of the things that I've always have been drawn to actually is photographs of people. Like, you find photographs, and but I didn't do it as much. But then during COVID, it really kind of kicked in, honestly. Whereas again, if you see the work that I was doing before, those books particularly, right, a lot of it is about, the remnants of people, and it's not about like me sitting across from somebody and photographing them. It's really just like, it's just been a different kind of, state of being, right? Like you're not spending time with folks. So, in that solitude, you still seek, right? You still seek that human connection. And there's something interesting about images of people, especially if they're discarded. That's very, I don't know, it's very intimate. And if you take it with you, or if you photograph it and you take it with you that way, you are, I don't know, you kind of have a relationship with these individuals all of a sudden. And when sometimes you feel like maybe you don't have relationships, or I don't know, where you're like missing some sort of element that way, I don't know, maybe it fills a void, or maybe it says something about, just like not knowing, again, like what's going on, and the spaces that we're in. Maybe that's more internal than external, but it's definitely a place to work from for myself. And that's why there's repetition. I feel like I may photograph these things over and over again. The one picture there of the couple, I mean, that's an amazing photograph that I found. That one. That's a beautiful photograph. It's actually framed. it's like really old, you know, like even the dimensions, right? Like, you know, you can't even print them these ways anymore, right? It's on film. It's from the late 70s, I think it was. I'm looking at in the back, there's like a little timepiece to it, but you know, that piece had to come in on its own. Again, I feel, again, in response to the home, to Poughkeepsie, to this community, to America, like, you know, this is what America looks like. If you go into that room, I tried to kind of depict I don't know, like a fictional version, if you will, of what I thought Poughkeepsie was kind of like, right? It's like these, you know, this old school, like, I don't know, like Black community or something, like, and then it's not, and then, you know, and it's like, it's really interesting. I don't know, and I wanted to kind of bring that in there. I felt like this room, if this photograph was from anywhere, it was from like Poughkeepsie a long time ago, and this couple lived there, and they spent some time there. And I was like, you know what, they need to be in the room. But it also sits on a wall where I think I've added other elements to it to kind of also tell another story again about, you know, life cycles, and I think there's like moons on that wall, and I think I have other photographs in there as well, you know, that talk about, it's almost like a collage, if you will, like splashed on the wall. So they kind of play a role in that, and that's kind of what it's been. And that's why, again, that's why I maybe photograph things more than once. It's about a rhythm. It's about, you know, moving and kind of passing them or staying long enough that you can take 2 or 3 photographs of them. You know, I don't know. It's blurry sometimes. Sometimes it's sharp. Sometimes it's in the middle. Sometimes it's not. But they kind of sit together, right? It's like a little conversation maybe I had with the photograph in the time that I spent, you know, photographing it or taking it off the ground. Sometimes I leave them. Sometimes I bring them home. You know.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to ask, I mean, I'm really sitting with what you're talking about, bringing these people into the room, which I think is so important. And something you talked about too, you know, just like needing to spend time, you know, we just said now, needing, you know, spending time with something or with a person or with a set of archival photographs so that you get to know it. And that is represented visually by those triptychs or quadtics or whatever. But it's also sort of the way that you made your show too, that it wasn't enough to come once to install, you had to install it and then change it. And then, you know, Danny's talked about that installation on the floor, but everything actually in the show has really, for the most part, has changed, you know, not much, but, you know, enough. So, you know, there's something moving and interesting to think about with these found photographs that, you know, you were spending time with them and that time, and maybe specifically like thinking about the body too, and your hands, and photographing or rephotographing or keeping these on the wall, or just, you know, there's like a care that's happening for these people, for these photographs, especially because you're finding them, you know, thrown out, right? And so there's a sort of like re-archiving or like rebuilding with that. I wonder if how you know, it's not exactly clear in my mind, but there's something there that's really interesting that, you know, you're rebuilding, you know, I think like your fictional landscape, your fictional world in that room that you're talking about of America is America and is certainly Poughkeepsie, parts of Poughkeepsie, right? And it depends on, of course, where you go and what community you're a part of, but that is a part of Poughkeepsie too. And so you're sort of, yeah, there's something there about rebuilding like the archive, you know, or like caring for the legacy, you know, the legacy of these people and the legacy of these pictures that you don't know about. And so I wonder how you think about that.
I mean, I think you said it. I think there's like this intense desire to care for something, right? I think a lot of these photographs, particularly how I found some of them, also hints at like a large scale like displacement, you know, like, you know, people are not where they used to be, people or who knows, you know, but like images displaced like this tells me that people are being displaced and that they're moving or that they're, you know, passing on, and who cares for that, you know? And I think that's important. I mean, I found some of these photographs in piles of like, you know, people's like, I don't know, like whole lives, you know, like rubble, where maybe someone passes and then maybe they take all their belongings and they just like maybe discard them under the bridge or something like that. And you know, and you find it, and it's like somebody's life, and it depicts these people again. I think, you know, yeah, maybe the way that they wanted to be depicted, right? And they love these images, and yeah, but there's something about it. I don't know. There is. Somebody needs to care about that, you know, like, yes. I don't know. I don't know who these people are, but their belongings got there for a reason. Yeah, what happened to them? You know, who are they? Why? You know, and why these people? You know.
I think too, what I'm thinking about too and sitting with is what I appreciate about your show, I think, is that you're not as the person who's caring for these photographs and also reusing them and like giving them you know, them and the people here, you know, sort of new life, or just sort of like valuing their significance, right? And valuing those lives that have been, yeah, that we don't know what's happened to them, or that people have been displaced, or lives that are, you know, destabilized. And like we talk a little bit about, you know, the pandemic and what's going on, and you know, yeah, there's, I mean, I'm thinking about, there's this big push to everything being back to normal. And but things are not back to normal, and people are still very destabilized. And so, you know, there's, what I find interesting is that you don't, in the person, as a person who's caring, you don't actually necessarily have to provide the answers, which is nice. You're not here, and your role is to bring these people into the room and to have them kind of, to have these pictures sort of in conversation with what you're talking about, and in conversation with having this work in a house, which is different than a gallery. But you're not, your role is not really there to tell us what the whole story is. And so that is also sort of a comfort, I think, interestingly for you and for us, you know, for me as a viewer of this, that I don't have to, I'm only getting part of the story. I have no idea what the story is with this couple, and I'm only going to get part of the story. And so if I'm looking for a sense of completeness or a sense of exactly what that story is, that's the wrong criteria to apply to this work, or to think about this work, because that's not what you're here for, and that's not what's going to happen here. It is about sort of the unknown and all of these different elements together, and yeah, and that we're getting bits and pieces of the story, and also I think really speaks to memory, which is what you're talking about with a lot of these different pieces. I want to turn to a different part of the exhibition. This is in another room here. We have this piece here, and we have this shelf that has some of your ceramics, some of your artist books, and we have also these pieces here that are pretty small. This one's much bigger, but they're pretty small. Can you tell us, because this is also touching on memory as well, can you tell us sort of what the story is with this and how you made this and what you're thinking about?
Yeah, you know, originally when I was thinking about how to use a space and what could be shown in the space, right? You know, I know you said that there's, I don't know, there's like hints of me not trying to prescribe necessarily stories, right? But there is, right? Like I'm very intentional about the images that I chose to put in there, right? And similarly, like, I don't know, we live in the Bronx, right? I don't know if you guys are considered upstate and we're considered downstate. I don't know what that is, but like I just think about like the journey, right? Like from here to go see the show is a physical thing, right? And so landing in a space to go see work, I was conscious of that again, and landing in a home, and I said, you know what? Maybe there's a space for this kind of work to live in you know, with this similar theme, but also in a different kind of medium, and maybe people can come and spend time and sit down and reflect a little bit, maybe of what they saw, and maybe, you know, some colors might add to it. And that's kind of how I got to these works originally, right? Like I don't necessarily paint, right? Like I'm not a painter. Like I'm interested in watercolor because of the medium, because it has water, because it has a certain fluidity to it, and at the same time, you can create, right, a whole new memory. I started this body of work after like spending some time researching and reading about I don't know. I mean, I have like a lot. I don't know. I've done research, obviously, about the African diaspora, right, and what it means to for like Black bodies, I guess, to cross the Atlantic, and a lot of that narrative, typically, depending on how you look at it, is it's deficit based, right? It's like slaves were brought here, and that's obviously a large part of it, right? But there's also these other narratives that I was kind of able to unearth that were like about people coming from the African continent across the Atlantic, like on purpose, like knowingly, like and doing it properly, and being able to come back home way before East and West and all these other kind of notions came to being, right? And that gave me like a real sense of like a wonderment, right? And what are those histories? And again, like how that's tied to my own history. And I had taken one of those DNA test type of things, right? And it's like, this is where your family's from, and some of it was pretty obvious, and some of it wasn't, right? And like, what does that mean? And so I can photograph something, right, in my time and capture that. I can even see an archival photograph of, let's say my grandparents, when they got here, whatever, 70 years ago, whatever. But then I could also imagine what it must have been like for things to kind of move, and bodies and ideas and culture and all that stuff to move across like the oceans and through time. And so this was kind of what I was trying to do with this stuff, honestly. It was like me trying to find a way to interpret like that exchange before I got here, before like the known parts of me got here, if you will. And so this is what it was, so all those colors kind of represent obviously different elements of the world, and skin tones and all that kind of stuff, right? And it kind of, but it's about this intentional thing. So that's why it's about, strict lines and kind of being very intentional about this back and forth and these kind of motions. And some of it also has like collage of my family photographs in it as well. And so it's this thing going back and forth. And again, trying to kind of come to terms with like unknown, memories and histories and spaces and time,
Yeah, I think there's so much that you said in there, and I mean, what I think about with this is, this piece is much bigger in this room, but these pieces are they're small and they're intimate, and so sort of for you thinking about that vast history of people coming across from the African continent and coming in that sort of east and west and back and forth, and trying to think about what that memory looks like and what that history looks like and that legacy looks like is a lot to think about. And it's so what I think about with this is that it's really interesting that these are really small, and that in one way you are thinking of that on a very intimate scale, and thinking of these as sort of, they're small, and so you can get up close to them and you can look at the colors and just sort of think about that. And I can look at that and think about that history, and also and just on an intimate small scale. I'm also just thinking about that, that exchange and that exchange of histories and cultures and bodies, and what you're talking about, and sort of how it's rendered abstract. Thinking, you can think about somebody coming here, or think about, as you said, your grandparents coming here 70 years ago. That's something a little bit more concrete, but it's still sort of to fully really think about that history is in some ways abstract, and it's nice to really interesting and powerful to look at this abstraction and sort of have that space for imagination, which I think you've talked about a lot, and you mentioned now too, is sort of imagination is really important and necessary as a space to think about that, and to think about kind of like what impact that makes on your life. And I want to, I think that we'll I want to wrap up right there for my questions. Danny, if you have anything else that you want to just sort of end on, I'll open up to you, and then we'll open it up for 5-10 minutes if anybody has any questions. If you have questions, just put them in the chat, and then I'll read them off. But Danny, I'll open it up to you. Do you have any sort of last thoughts right now?
No, I mean, again, I'm just grateful for the time to kind of share the work and particular visions, and yeah, it's good to see. Like, I saw Ronnie on here, you know what I mean? Like, I have some folks I haven't seen so in a while. So yeah, I don't have necessarily questions, but I think, again, as we kind of enter the world, and in this world that we're living in, right? Like, as we continue to kind of have to grapple with it, I think you said something about imagination and being okay with like holding monuments, to each other and to our humanity, and building that into these processes, of life as much as possible. So that's the only word I want to give is like, how do we, even for myself, how do we continue to do that, to be mindful and to, really monumentalize each other and respect each other that way. Yeah, as much as possible. I know this is not easy times, but can we do that? Can we take on that challenge to even imagine something like that right now? I just want to put that out there, and I think everybody here is probably aware of that, and I'm preaching to the choir, but that's my only word, man. Like peace and love. I don't know what else to say, man. Like, life is too crazy otherwise, man. What's going on,
Yeah.
But thank you guys.
Thank you, Danny. Yeah, if we have we'll open up now. If anybody has any questions or comments or wants to see another, wants me to go back, I can go back and look at some other pieces of Danny's. Maybe as we do that, I'll just sort of flip through, go backwards. All right. So from Andy Bush, the life cycle of the house, bringing people into the room, beautiful. So how do you, Sasha, understand the place of the project space in that life cycle? And Danny, what is the moment in the life cycle when you feel it's time to show your work to others? That's a good one. Danny, do you wanna start, and then I'll go after you? I'll just keep flipping.
Oh, yeah, thank you for the question. I don't know. I think that's a very good question because I feel like that's something that I think comes with the projects and comes with the intention of the body of work. I feel like right now in a certain world, like somebody tells you, look, I got a couple wall spaces for you. Let's do some work. I think you're jumping at it, right? So yeah, it's time to put it up, right? Like, when is the work ready for others? Like right now, right? Because there's a wall, yes. All right. So like yesterday, we need to have that ready. That's kind of the urgency I'm working with. But again, it all really is relative, and I think that's one of the things that I'm become okay with in my later years. Is that, like, all of it is relative, right? You're never gonna make anything perfect per se. Photography and art and all that doesn't have to have, a pretty, front and back cover. And sometimes it's good to put something together in 2 or 3 weeks and present it to the world and continue to go with it. And that's a thing too. So, I don't think that there's a right or wrong way. Really, it's just about, yeah, where you are yourself and where you want to be and what that means at the time,
Yeah, I think for me, life cycle of the house, I definitely think there's James and I are using the space, in the house as a space to support artists and support emerging artists and curators. And, that word emerging is sort of relative, but, it's really sort of the life cycle of the house has taken on something completely different than when Eric and Nancy lived here in some ways, because this house was a house and there's never a gallery. But in other ways, I think it fits right in with, a good celebration of their lives and a continuation of what they did, because Nancy and Eric had a lot of friends over, and while they were working on different projects, their own or each other's or collaborative projects, they would have friends stay over at the house. And it really, I think, there are a lot of different people who stayed there. So I think that the life cycle of the house, what we're doing with Danny's exhibition here and some of the other exhibitions in our downstairs galleries and our upstairs galleries fits right in with, what Nancy and Eric did. And really, honoring and celebrating their lives, and also just sort of, as Danny said, there's, it's important to use spaces, to open up space where you have it for others to make work, and also sort of take risks. I really appreciate that Danny is so trusting to be able to just, have a conversation, show work that maybe some of it is complete, some of it he's not sure about. I think that really is the purpose of this space, so that artists can come in and show work that maybe is incomplete or that's in development, without the need to be experts on it. But that's really sort of, the life cycle of the house is kind of thinking about how to use this space to open up more space for other artists and writers and curators, and people and friends and neighbors to come and see work and see art. Cool. Dan, you're getting some love in the chat there.
That's a question from Ronnie in there. What's up, Ronnie? It's good to see you too, man.
Hey, Danny.
How are you, bro?
Good. We need to catch up.
Yeah, man. It's been a while, man. Hopefully you're doing well, man. Thank you for jumping in today, bro.
Didn't want to miss it.
Oh, cool, man. Well, when you met me, Ronnie, a couple years back, man, I was kind of on a trip, man. And I was trying to figure out what not to do with the camera. And I'm still kind of in that mode, based on your question here. The last 2 years have been about that, right? It's always about the change of perspective and the process and pivoting, like, constantly, right? To kind of continue to go, but also in response to the world, right? Like, there's just so much going on. And so that's probably how my work is pivoted. It has changed, but it's really, I think a continuation of where I started. I think the part that was whack is like the COVID kind of slowing down a certain momentum of work. And again, just luckily I've already been experimenting, because I didn't have any fear in playing that, while I had to. But that's kind of where I've been. It's still a big experiment for me, But thank you for asking, bro.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. We'll wrap up. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Danny, thank you for being so gracious and answering so many questions, and for sharing your time. And for anybody who is interested, next Sunday, the 6th, from 2 to 6, we're going to have open hours at the project space. So if anybody's interested in coming to see the exhibition, MTFCit, Danny R. Peralta's exhibition, you can email, you can reach out to Danny, you can reach out to me. This is our the archives email address. You can always, this is our website where you have our information, and this is our Instagram account. So you can always send me a message if you want to reach out. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you guys, for real. Thank you, Sasha. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Peace.
Bye.
Thank you.
Which one?